Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Yeah.
So, as side government, we come forward with the following resolution that be it resolved that the House will leave economic development to market forces. So, Madam Speaker, I'll start off with the definition of this resolution. By House, we mean the Government of Canada. By economic development, we mean subsidies and distortionary taxes that are placed in the businesses. And by market forces, we mean the current players in the market, like big corporations as well as individual businesses. So I'll start off with the implementation plan of our resolution. That is, to make it feasible, we'll get rid of any extra taxes like mining tax, deforestation tax. We want to make it clear that consumer taxes will still be in place and they will be funding the current programs in place. Also, with subsidies, we will be giving a stimulus to these programs. But as side government, we will replace minimum wage by minimum, as we want to focus on social areas specifically. We also are trying to get rid of bureaucracy and the economic agencies in place, as we believe that the market can itself take its course and the big players in the market can take responsibility themselves. So, Madam Speaker, what is wrong currently with the status quo? We believe as side government, we feel that the government doesn't have efficient strategies in place for economic development. The political meetings in place or different cabinet meetings consume an enormous amount of resources which ultimately are useless because they're not making an impact that matters the most. So as side government, we believe that there should be a change. And we have three main key contentions. The first one, that the government's current strategies are ineffective and we want to focus on distributive intelligence. Second, ineffectiveness in the market. So we trust consumers and we believe that they'll be more efficient on their own. Third, we want to separate social programs from economic. So, Madam Speaker, we believe that government doesn't have sufficient control on economic development. Government is not doing enough for the development of the economy. So, an example of this being distortionary taxes in place, like shred tax, as well as mining tax. So these taxes, they are an additional burden on the citizens of our country. It takes a toll on the hard-earned money, on the people who make their living doing extensive hard work. We do agree with the fact that subsidies are in place, but the current subsidies are not even effective in fostering development in the long run. They haven't been that efficient enough to be effective enough. So we believe that these extra taxes are in a way disrupting the actual flow of investment. So whatever investments can be done, these taxes discourage potential investors to invest because they believe that they're being charged enough. So as side government, we want our community to innovate by itself. We believe that key players in the market should take charge and lead from front. By rectifying the tax code, we want to spur innovation. So by this, we mean that we will try to get rid of the current taxes in place and will focus more on innovation by the market itself. So we will give more autonomy to the players in the market and encourage ways to spur development in our country. And my other team members will cover points 2 and 3 that are about inefficiency and separating social programs from economy. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are you going to do 7 or 5? Or no timing?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The side opposition is quite amazed by the government's final discovery that it is totally ineffective, without strategy, a consumer of resources that has no impact. And from listening to side government, they have not fixed that. No, side government has complained about, we have these taxes, we have distortion in taxes. We want to leave everything until the market. I think the government should just turn on the light and go home. It'll be perfectly consistent with what they say. What we inside opposition hold dear is that economic life, social life, business life, community life is interdependent. You can't address one part of it without impacting the other. For example, suppose we have a small mining town. That, the markets decide, is no longer viable. The mine shuts down, 300 miners are unemployed, their families are unemployed, the storekeepers, the school teachers, the local nursing station, and so the whole community disappears. The idea that we can do things without coordination is a problem. Number one, the democratic government should stand here and argue that it is irrelevant? No. Madam Speaker, this particular government with this type of resolution is irrelevant, but by and large what we need is coordination. We don't need to see the economy go where it wants and suddenly the government says, well, oh yeah, there's some social problems, so we'll put a Band-Aid on. We'll throw out a Mincome program. We'll put in some other social Band-Aids and everything will be okay. We are trying to lead and build a coordinated effort to make this a better Canada. A Canada that is sustainable, a Canada that is community-based, and a Canada that will succeed, because when we all succeed, we all succeed. We want a society that moves together. Yes?
Madam Speaker, so if the opposition is so much interested in a coordinated effort, why this coordinated effort hasn't been successful before?
That's a very good question. We haven't been successful before because no one can hold the hands of time back. It requires constant vigilance, constant response to a changing set of targets, a constant changing set of problems, and we have to be on guard. We have to be responsive. We have to be flexible in our coordinated response to the changing circumstances. That is exactly what you are trying to avoid. Yes?
Madam Speaker, it sounds like the opposition is suggesting adding bureaucratic hoops and plugging a bunch more money into having the government predict market outcomes.
Madam Speaker, opposition seems to think that all government coordination requires bureaucrats. Is it not possible for governments to organize meetings and collectives of stakeholders and have the stakeholders determine a coordinated path forward? For example, get back to the mining. We can't open a mine there because there's no railroad. We're not going to build a railroad until we know there's going to be a mine there. We can't build a mine unless we know there's going to be a settlement with possible workers there. These decisions have to be coordinated. We know that markets fail in this type of coordination problem. And that is the primary role of government, is coordination. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Go for it.
Is it first 2 minutes per chapter for you?
I'm rusty on this.
It's okay, I am too. This is gonna be fun.
Howard,
Yeah.
is it first 2 minutes per chapter for him, or what's the time?
I think it's the first minute and the last minute.
It's always
Yeah,
like
it's
that?
just nutty on the last off.
Oh, okay.
But maybe nutty with Devin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker. Now, before I begin, I would like to point out that we have accepted a new opposition in the House. They may not be aware, but they are actually allowed to give POIs, even though there's only 2 of them. Now, Madam Speaker, I'm going to do 2 things for you today. I'm going to explain the flaws in the Leader of the Opposition's arguments, and then I will expand upon the benefit of removing government from economic development, and furthermore explain the inefficiencies of bureaucracy. Now, I was prepared to talk about our second point, bureaucracy itself, the others being our first point, distributive intelligence, which the Prime Minister spoke of, and the social development, which my third partner will bring up. But before I get into that, I must correct some of the misleading points that the Leader of the Opposition brought up. And first and foremost, the opposition seems to believe in this anarchist state. They suggested that if the government doesn't want any point or any say in the economy, then we should just pack up and go home as the government, Mr. Speaker, that we have no purpose being in power, and that we're not going to be able to deliver such things as social programs. Their view is that if our hand is not in the economy, then we're not good for anything else. But, Madam Speaker, as the government, we think that is very contradictory. We think that the economy is taking away from the government's ability to provide these social resources. We think that if we took the money that we spent on trying to predict market outcomes, then we could put this towards social development, Madam Speaker. And that this would be a far better use of our time and resources as the government. Second of all, the Leader of the Opposition brought up further on their point the separation of society from the economy, and that this is a problem. And they went into example on a mining town, very specifically. And this is a great example for us as the government, Madam Speaker, because they think that it's an issue. The opposition believes that it's an issue that an entire mining town falls to pieces and that they're left unemployed, with the nurses unemployed and the farmers unemployed. They went on in great detail, Madam Speaker. But this is exactly the issue that we see on side government. The opposition's trying to prop up a dying industry. They're trying to take a mining town that has all the resources have been stripped. Maybe it's either not profitable, whatever they're mining, or there's nothing left to be mined, and they want to continue providing them resources, wasting the government's money. Would you not agree?
No, I disagree. You want to rely upon distributed intelligence. What coordinates that distributed intelligence?
Well, this gets to a third point that the Leader of the Opposition brought up, but I can jump to it now quickly. The opposition, Madam Speaker, thinks that coordination of stakeholders, of investors, is mutually exclusive from this resolution, and it's not. The opposition needs to understand that we can cut back on taxes and we can remove subsidies, and we can also coordinate stakeholders. That's not something that's limited by this resolution. We can still provide a coordination role. We're just not going to be investing in the economy ourselves and subsidizing businesses. And that's a key flaw in the leader of the opposition's logic that he brought up. Now, just to jump back to one of the issues that the leader of the opposition had brought up earlier, was they stated that it requires constant vigilance, thank you, to be successful as in predicting market outcomes. That we would need to put a lot of resources as the government into discovering what industries we should invest in, what would be the best for who. And this leads me into my point perfectly, Madam Speaker, because this is the bureaucracy that we're trying to avoid. They think somehow that by adding additional hoops, we are going to be more efficient. By spending more money, we're somehow going to be more successful. They don't know that. They don't have they don't have the ability to predict the future, and they cannot prove to you that by spending more money on market predictions, we will see a return on our investment. I'll put it to you like this, Madam Speaker. When the government invests in an industry or plays with the economy, it's like a 100-meter dash, and the market has an unobstructed, multiple members in this 100-meter dash. They've got a great chance of winning. But the government is throwing in a bunch of hurdles, and they're choosing one runner. They think that their one runner can jump over a bunch of hurdles and outrun every single one of the market contestants that don't have obstacles. This is absurd, Madam Speaker, and this is exactly why we are trying to remove government's hand in the economy. Furthermore, on bureaucracy, the reason that we are trying to tax consumers instead of businesses is twofold, and the first is the formal incidence. While we may place the burden as the government onto the business, it shifts the tax burden onto the consumer anyways, and the consumer ends up paying the tax. So we are no further behind by taxing the consumers directly and making back up this income than had we simply tax the organizations and the corporations in the first place. Furthermore, by removing our hand from government, we allow every individual that puts money into the government or into the economy to have a say. We allow every individual to take out their checkbook and to choose where they want to invest their money. It's not fair for the government to collect all these taxes and then to choose on behalf of them where they're investing my money. I do not think that the government should have the power to invest in pharmaceuticals when I would much rather invest my money in natural resources. And this is the issue that we are trying to solve. Now, the importance of removing government and the bureaucracy that currently occurs is important because it's just absurd the number of meetings and by removing all of these, we do have additional income that we will talk about that can fund the social services that my partner will talk about. Thank you.
Devin, two side notes. I'm not the leader, the first speaker on opposition is not the leader of the opposition. Second one, that is the best speech you ever gave.
I'd like to add that actually you did a phenomenal job. Never say no. It's hard, but never say
Thank you.
Look how red he is in the face. He is did a good job.
Madam Speaker, believe me, I'm a bit out of practice at this. What we're talking about today has been turned into something that's clinical, disgusting, based solely around money. This is not the reality as the opposition sees it. Allow me to paint a picture for you. A young man, 26 years old, coming home from work, he opens his door, he greets his kids, his 3 lovely kids. He's just finished Christmas shopping for them this past week. It's pretty exciting. How is he able to do this? Let me tell you, he's an auto worker. He works in an industry that we heavily subsidize. He works in an industry that we keep competitive. And because of this, we keep him fed. We keep his kids happy. We keep his kids warm. There's value to this. My distinguished colleague mentioned the issues that we take with the argument as put forward by the government. Those issues being the separation of the social and economic. Well, let me tell you, Madam Speaker, the social, the environmental, the economic are the heart, the brains, and the lungs of Canada. You cannot simply extricate one. Without them, the system dies. Subsidies are necessary to maintain employment. Employment is necessary for individuals to have value.
But Madam Speaker, doesn't a MINCOM and social education programs replace the need for subsidies?
I will certainly grant you that remove the need for any kind of monetary subsidy, but what about the value? The value inherent in being a human being. Let's talk about the social contract. Let's talk about the good life. Components of this are not just money. Components of this are value. Feeling like you make a contribution to society, Madam Speaker.
So, Mr. Speaker, when someone's job is being kept alive only because the government is paying for it to be there, how does that person feel like they're actually contributing to society and moving it forward?
Madam Speaker, I would ask if you drive a car. Do you? Madam Speaker drives a car. Madam Speaker, benefits from the transference of labor. Hey, none of that shit. Sorry, Madam Speaker, benefits from this labor. This auto worker, this young man, this man who's providing for his family, is able to go home feeling good about the fact that he has provided transportation for people. He has given them access. He has shrunk the world for them. This is a huge value. I would also like to address some of the points brought forward by the government, Madam Speaker. Now, throughout the course of their speaking, we heard that the government feels and that the government thinks. Well, let me just take the opportunity to say, quite frankly, the opposition thinks. And the opposition thinks that bureaucracy is not a bad thing. Bureaucracy, yeah, that's right. We're the ones who brought you unions. Safety, the right to refuse dangerous work, the weekend. These are all gifts that were brought to you by bureaucracy, which is being unaccountably assailed by the government. They spoke of propping up a dying industry. What right does the opposition have to determine whether an industry should live or die? What right does a doctor have to determine when a patient should live or die? It's a moral obligation. Healthcare is another great example of subsidies. How many corporations are subsidized through mass purchases given out through tenders to the government? How about defense spending? It would appear as though the government no longer wants to subsidize healthcare. What do you think we should go to? A private funded system? This is unacceptable. This again shirks the responsibilities of government. Now, the government gave an absolutely lovely analogy. That analogy was a runner, going crazy, giving it all he's got, with some help from the government. But now the issue was, are we hampering everyone else just to help this one man? And is that the right choice? Let me tell you, it is not only the right choice, it is the ethical choice. If that runner is responsible for tens of thousands of jobs, we absolutely have an obligation to support him. At this point, it's clear. The government has taken a position that is simply untenable. Thank you for your time. I understand.
Good.
Are you counting up or down? Down, okay. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, side opposition thinks that our plan is some sort of band-aid solution. However, if we look at the status quo, we see an economy that is full of more band-aids than someone who's just narrowly escaped a house fire. We have these band-aids in the form of subsidies holding together these industries that side opposition thinks are so dear to the needs of Canada today and in the future. They bring up these mine town situations, which in reality is just a long, drawn-out play, a virtual reality which is not providing any real value to the future of Canada. simply pretending that these industries are viable and that they are doing something for the future growth of our country. But at this time, Madam Speaker, I would like to move into some refutation of what the second opposition member has brought forward in their speech. Now, in their introduction, they first talked about this auto industry and gave this example of this worker who feels so wonderful and fulfilled by their job because they are an industry that is kept competitive, as I would quote them. Now, we can't simply keep something competitive. The reason that that industry is subsidized to begin with is because it's not competitive. They also said, what right does the government have to decide if these industries live or die? And that, Madam Speaker, is our point exactly. Right now, the government is deciding who sinks and swims, who gets those subsidies, who gets those exemptions, and who is allowed to survive even though they have no real place in the future economy of our country. Now, they talked about this wonderful idea of human value and how everyone needs to feel happy and have butterflies on the inside because they're contributing to everyone's great daily life. Now, this is wonderful, and we agreed that everyone, of course, deserves to feel valued, but I wouldn't agree that that person's feeling valued when they're stuck working in an industry that they know is crumbling, working in an industry that they know has no viable future except for the fact that the government is paying to keep them alive. That's not value. That's make-believe. And that's not a world that these workers want to be living in. Our proposition on side government today is a world where these people can have real value towards the future. Real value to get the education, to move forward, develop themselves, to grow in an economy where the people decide what matters and what does not. That, Madam Speaker, is true value, not what side opposition is harping on today. Now, under this method, we would support an industry of compliment givers simply because they're making people feel nice. That's not what we do in society. Business is pretty cut or dry. We need to decide what works and what does not, and that's how we move forward, not sitting in a world where everyone feels lovely because we're making someone feel like, oh, I got to drive to work today. But, of course, they haven't really proven their burden on their side of the house that the status quo is acceptable and actually accomplishing what we want for the future of Canada. And in that, I would like to move into my case today and talk about this whole idea of social development. Now, as we stated in our feasibility plan, social programming would be separate from the economy. These are the programs that Canadians identify with when we're looking at healthcare and its additions, education and its additions, and all these other social programs and supports that would ultimately remain untouched, as these programs would continue to be funded through these taxes, which would be placed on consumers in the most part, essentially taking these taxes from the wealthy and benefiting those who are eventually, in the long run, less fortunate. Now, if we look to a plan of establishing this minimum income, this is actually encouraging fair wages, higher education, and social development. Because when we look at our minimum wage right now, a way that the government is giving that crush to the economy to move forward and decide what's viable and what isn't, we are providing a perverse incentive for these make-work projects. We are keeping a large amount of Canadians busy and employed without much real impact, just so that they can have a job, be making the minimum wage, and doing these little jobs in industries that, once again, really aren't viable. But if we look towards minimum income, we see a system that allows people to take the time off of work if they need, to get educated, develop themselves, and strive towards that goal. As a minimum income still does provide that incentive to improve yourself. Because if you're only making 70% of the poverty line on a minimum income, you won't really feel as if that's adequate and that's how you want to live your life out until the end. You will be incentivized to grow, develop yourself, get that education required for that job, which will see you making double that and improving your standard of living into the future. And of course, when we see more people taking advantage of these opportunities to develop themselves with the social programs that of course would remain in place, we see that social development and overall benefit for our country. But also we see that the separation of social programs and the economy really stabilizes this whole social support program. As the economy goes in cycles, and when we have them tied together, like side opposition would love to see it continue, the well-being of individuals, whether it be mental health support or community centers, is simply not guaranteed. Because in this case, funding comes and goes with these economic cycles. Our plan is much more stable. Because consumers, of course, always need to consume, whereas these industries and companies are relying on the ups and downs of profits and that's simply not stable for these social programs that are needed by all Canadians. The opposition's plan sees this mine town collapsing when we introduce this carbon tax to try and direct the economy, and then all of a sudden those people not only don't have a job, but they don't have the social programs in place because that one industry in that community is no longer viable and there's no longer funding for it. Would you not agree?
I disagree. You misunderstood side opposition. We never said mining towns, fisheries towns, any of these towns are disappearing because of a carbon tax. We're just saying that whatever the economic shock is that causes these towns to go downhill, you're just going to say, that's the will of the market.
You're cut off, sorry, that's too long.
But you see, under our plan, these people will have that social safety net in place in a stable manner. Side opposition has talked about these mining towns quite explicitly, and they are expecting these social shocks in the form of carbon taxes and other government interference. And when this happens, and when we don't have this stable social program, we see much more of a detriment to society. And with the points that we have seen on both sides of the House today, we see that the resolution really lands on our side. Because of social development, because of the future of our economy, and because, of course, the people know best. And when we put the power in the hands of the people, we will see a better future for all Canadians. And Madam Speaker, for these reasons, the resolution must and certainly will stand. Thank you.
Well done, Ed. That was good.
Very-
That was 20 seconds of a POI.
Oh, you're
Just
just
talking, it's interrupting.
Madam Speaker, what side government fails and continuously fails to understand is that very often we determine as a society some very broad, moonshot goals. We want an economy that is sustainable. We want an environment that is protected. We want to be an inclusive society. The market isn't going to get us there. Without the guidance of government, we cannot get there. The government in a democratic society is empowered to go for these goals. We cannot achieve the goals by looking at these goals separate from the economy, because the society, the business, the environment, the health status are all tied together. Yes.
Madam Speaker, this is suggesting that the government knows best, and if society truly, each and all of them believe in these goals, they can individually pursue them and achieve them better than the government can by itself.
Madam Speaker, the government has been informed at the elections by the people, by what these goals are. That's why government will know best, because the democracy works. It is the coordination of our society, in a democratic society, that we want a responsible government. Oh, there's non-democratic alternatives. Sure, we can have dear leader telling us what we all want. But no, what we have is throwing away democracy. We have simply, we're going to let the market determine everything. And maybe there's a few fires lit, we're going to sprinkle some water on them as the outcome. No, this is what this debate is about. Should we allow the private, narrow decision-making of individuals determine where our society as a whole goes? Or should we set the broad directions, the broad path through a democratic political system and allow all the details, of course, to be solved by the market forces, not the bureaucracy? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Where was your bomb? You didn't drop a bomb.
I didn't.
Well,
The closest thing I can keep saying is that you guys are not saying where the coordination is coming from.
Why don't you try and show that government actually has historically successfully invested in
It's not where government is invested, it's the coordination in setting the goals. It is, you know, when you bring in images of moonshots, everything. And you can't argue with history.
Okay,
You can't say, you know, if for elephants really did a job on the Roman army here.
Okay, well, look at the government's track record. You don't think it would be beneficial to argue as the opposition that,
No, the track record would certainly help the side government in this debate.
well, no, but look at all of the current inventions that we have, the internet, you know, a bunch of the smartphone functions, the
Canadian
pharmaceuticals.
government, internet's DARPA.
Sorry?
Canadian government, internet's DARPA, so it's the States.
No, but,
No.
but that's the government, right? That's a good example
No.
of the government.
Well, you know, you're really talking about the government as a source of innovators, and that's different than the government leaving to market forces. Remember, you defined it where our battleground. This was your prime minister's speech. You didn't say, you weren't talking about innovation, where innovation comes. Will innovation be better off without any government involved? So you did not bring that up, so it's
Hard
not,
for you to bring it up.
yeah, it's very hard for us to bring it up at this point. If he had opened, if he had said, no, the free market does all the innovation, then you know where I would be coming from.
Yeah.
And since talk all about the state support of ARPANET, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All of the wartime procurement and so forth that has driven the economy, I would have come forward on that. But essentially, you know, without going into the final prime minister's speech, because time is flying,
Yeah.
I think you guys did a great job. Now, you had to realize, going into this, 2 hours ago, you were saying, how the hell can we argue that? You know
You guys
what?
crushed it.
Huh?
I said you guys crushed it.
You crushed it. You realize that. I gave you the worst case that you could get in the sense of, you would be